Mr. Müller, doctors often prescribe orthopaedic insoles for a wide range of complaints, be it in the foot, knee, hip or back. Can orthopaedic soles help the patient?
Your question is actually asking, is it more important to mobilize or to stabilize? I think that fundamentally people need to be mobile, because you lose what you don't use. A rolling stone gathers no moss. If you only move a joint in one way, you'll lose everything you don't use. Use it or lose it. If you use insoles for a long period of time, your foot will stop being able to move in a free and natural way. They restrict the movement of the foot. Imagine you're holding a ball in your hand. Simply because your hand hurts, you're holding a ball here, and you're only making this movement over several years. You wouldn't be able to stretch your hands out anymore. You would lose a function. The feet are the foundation of our bodies. With about 30 bones and 30 muscles, they are there to take as much strain and to move as much as possible. That's why, in certain circumstances, a stabilizing insole might make sense in the short term. As people hold themselves back, they take it easy and they limp. I think using insoles for a longer period of time is, I don't want to say a crime against humanity, but it massively interferes with your entire body. Anything you don't have to move in your feet, you'll have to compensate for in your knees, hips and back later. And then you'll be constantly adopting relieving postures. One day, you won't be able to walk anymore.
So just to summarize, you said an insole would be a possibility, but only if it's a short-term solution, so that the body can stabilize in order to heal an injured area. But then the insole should be removed again. Have I understood that correctly?
Yes, if anything, I would never recommend insoles for myself, to my family, or to my employees. I would recommend going easy on the affected area or using the kybun shoe, which is very, very gentle when walking, to spread the strain in the best way possible. Because in the vast majority of cases, you can walk a lot less painfully, even if you've ruptured your cruciate ligament or if you've pulled or torn a ligament, than if you always stabilize it. I wouldn't stabilize, I would always mobilize. An insole makes sense in the short term, for anyone who can't get hold of kybun materials.
There are lots of people who wear insoles, and the insoles apparently help them too. They reduce pain. Can you explain why that's the case?
Yes, they're pain-free for a certain time, especially when you're young. But it's inevitable that you'll suffer from other complaints eventually if you can no longer move your feet properly. The foot is the perfect shock absorber for the knee. If you can no longer move freely, if you don't use this shock absorber anymore, then you're destined for a knee problem or a hip problem, depending on the person.
Despite this, doctors still prescribe insoles more often than not. We also know that these are paid for by the insurance companies. Is that at most a reason why insoles are prescribed so often? There must be some reason why doctors prescribe insoles so often.
An insole is the best preparation for an operation. If they want to make a lot of money with an operation later down the line, they have to start with an insole. You then also can't work out what the root of the problem was in the first place. There is also not one single study that proves that insoles are beneficial. That's why it's still a mystery to me as to why they're prescribed. I assume that it's simply the norm, and they've been prescribed since time immemorial. I also assume it's good business for a lot of people.
Can you tell us what the difference is between an orthopaedic insole, a kybun shoe and a kybun mat, or what they all have in common?
One stabilizes and the other mobilizes. They're similar in that you have something under your foot. That's where they're similar. With a kybun shoe, you have an elastic, springy material between your foot and the hard floor, which encourages the foot to work, and with an insole, you have something between your foot and the floor that stabilizes and that prevents the foot from moving.
Would you mind explaining the difference between stabilization and mobilization again?
Mobilization is encouraging the foot to move, and stabilization is preventing the foot from moving. Of course, you can reduce pain by preventing movement. If you don't move an area that has a problem, a ligament in your foot, if you don't move it, then it won't hurt. But at some point, you have to move it again. And if all the fascia in this area agglutinate and you start moving it again, for example, if you had a cast, once you're out of the cast, you have to encourage this movement again, and that involves pain. From what I've seen when it comes to insoles, these people always have them in and aren't interested in whether their fascia are agglutinated or not, and they can't move their foot properly. But they think it's normal, they can't move their foot. Then, in old age, they only take small steps, and they just move their thighs and are bent over. There comes a point when they can only walk with the help of a frame.
So you're saying that orthopaedic soles support the body externally, meaning it has less to do and can relax, as it were. Mobilization is actually a sort of training. Am I understanding this correctly?
Mobilization is training for the feet. For every muscle, from head to toe. And because every muscle is inextricably linked, you train the entire body. The other prevents movement, which eventually leads to stiffness in old age.
Mr. Müller, a few doctors and orthopaedists warn people against the kybun shoe. What are your thoughts about that?
I'm astonished at the nerve of it. It just demonstrates the ignorance of these people. They have no idea what they're talking about. Either they simply don't know it, they've heard that the kybun shoe is bad, or they're doing it deliberately, simply because they know that the patient will need an operation at some point if they have insoles.
Can people also use an orthopaedic sole in conjunction with the kybun shoe, or would you advise people against that?
There are really rare cases in which it makes sense, when in the kybun shoe, in the forefoot area, when you lift the forefoot in cases of Morton's neuroma, relieving the strain and also buying time to reduce the inflammation. In certain circumstances with hallux rigidus, if there is too much movement in the kybun shoe, then you stiffen that area. In other words, you put in a stiffened sole to give the toe or toe joints time to adjust to the new movement over a transition period of a few weeks. But after that, I would definitely take the insole out.
Then maybe starting with a combination of a kybun shoe and an orthopaedic insole and then taking the insole away again isn't the perfect solution. Or would you say you should use kybun shoes right from the outset?
It's difficult to say. It's completely different from patient to patient or customer to customer. That's why I would recommend to everyone that they try it out. Either register under the advisor section of our website or visit a kybun partner to try the shoe out for yourself and see what works best. You can also rent them for 2 weeks if need be. You can use those 2 weeks to work out which solution is the right one for you.
You mentioned renting. Can you rent the kybun shoe?
You can rent the kybun shoe from any of our partners or retailers. You can also rent them online. This means you're not taking a risk or buying an expensive shoe that ultimately doesn't help.
You mentioned 2 cases before, such as hallux. Are there cases in which you'd say the kybun shoe makes no sense? In these cases, I wouldn't recommend a kybun shoe.
A kybun shoe wouldn't be of any benefit to someone who can't walk barefoot on a soft lawn or on elastic, springy moss. If you can't do that, then the kybun shoe isn't for you. If you think you can't do that with a stiff ankle, then you'll be amazed when you try out walking barefoot on elastic, springy moss or a soft surface. It makes walking, even with a stiff ankle joint, much better.
Great. Thank you so much for the interview, Mr. Müller.
Thank you.